Chapter 8. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Can I get reinfected? Unfortunately, the next time we met, Carl wasn't doing nearly as well. He had a dental appointment scheduled for the next day and needed $4,000 worth of work done. That was in addition to approximately $10,000 he'd spent on his teeth the year before. He'd already had several teeth pulled, and along with getting a bridge, he might need to have another tooth pulled. He told us his teeth had gotten weak as a result of his illness, and they had become very vulnerable to cavities, especially in the past few years. But finding out he might need to get another tooth pulled was still a shock for him. "I hate having to go back there," he said. "It's just traumatic." The Arcturians told me Carl's dental problems were not related to the reptilians. Lisa sensed they were the results of his inner anger. But Carl's most immediate concern was the possibility of getting reinfected. He acknowledged he wasn't very good at protecting himself or being able to tell when anything, such as a discarnate, might be coming at him. I felt that he was being protected to a certain extent because my guides told me he was, but Carl still needed to learn how to be a good housekeeper and gate guardian, as Robert put it. Otherwise, he could end up back in trouble again. Robert suggested Carl start taking time to cleanse his house whenever he went out. Carl said he had tried smudging and all that. Although that bothered his allergies, he knew there were other things he could do to lighten and shift the energy. Robert also wanted Carl to start protecting himself with light whenever he left his house. He could ask the angels and archangels to protect him and visualize himself covered in light. Lastly, Carl should try to remember to cleanse again before re-entering his house and after anyone else visited him. Lisa described how she creates a sun orb around herself when she goes out in public. "I just have the sun come from my heart chakra outward, like an egg-shaped orb of golden light, so nothing can penetrate it." Although he had trouble remembering to do those kinds of things, Carl said he would make an effort. I told him to use whatever worked for him when he left his house and when he returned. His energy and vibrational frequency were still low enough that he wasn't able to completely fend for himself, so the angels and archangels and the Arcturians were watching over him. Because he was in such a vulnerable state, he was under their special protection. They were with him at all times, surrounding him. But he still needed to learn to be more mindful and aware of what was going on around him, and to practice techniques to protect himself. In the meantime, because of that special protection, I didn't believe Carl was going to, in his words, get slammed again. If he did, he knew where to turn for help. He said he hoped that one day he would be as certain about all of this as the rest of us were. But doubt was the norm for him. After so many years of illness and frustration, he'd had little experience of being effective in making positive changes. The process he was going through might be 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but to me, that was a lot better than remaining stagnant, or even worse, continually sliding backwards. Telling Jose's story. Before we began working on Carl, however, Lisa and I had something to share with him and with Robert. Over the weekend, we did a healing on Jose, the boyfriend of a woman we had previously worked with. The woman thought she had seen 3 demons on top of Jose's head, and she tried to engage them. That didn't go very well, so she got him to make an appointment with me. When someone has demons, I usually get nauseous just talking to that person on the telephone. But in this case I didn't, nor did I feel nauseous when Jose arrived for his appointment. When we all sat down together for the healing, the very same thing happened that had happened with Carl and a few others. Jesus, Michael, and the rest all just stood there. I asked Jose if he was not allowing Jesus in. I wasn't feeling anything though, so I was pretty sure we were dealing with reptilians and they were blocking me. I looked over at Lisa to get some confirmation. Her eyes were closed, but after a few seconds she opened them and looked at me. She said she saw 3 hooded figures, the one in the middle larger than the other 2, and they had started attacking her neck just as they had when we were working with Carl. I told Lisa to disengage immediately. I asked Orion and the Arcturians if they could take care of the reptilians, and they said yes. Lisa asked the same question to herself and also got an affirmative response. Then they started to take all 3 of them. I said, "Are you sure? You want to do all of them?" They did. They took the 3 of them at once, right then and there. It was amazing. Once the reptilians were gone, one demon was finally able to leave. Then another one left. After that, 5 discarnate spirits were taken to the light too. Jose had served in the military during the Gulf War, and the discarnates were Persians. While he was over there, Lisa said, they ran right into him. He was like an open portal. Without a doubt, it was the most powerful healing session I'd been involved in up to that point. Carl's had also been very powerful, but in Jose's case, we were able to remove the 3 reptilians together, and then multiple demons and discarnates, all in the same session. We then closed the portal that connected Jose with the reptilians. Lisa believes the reptilians are capable of dimension hopping. They enter and leave our dimension through these portals. The reptilians we removed from Jose had entered him when he was around 3 years of age, which was a different situation from Carl's, since he had been born with them. When Lisa spoke with Jose afterwards, he told her he felt like he'd had surgery. He was in bed for a couple of days, and he just kept purifying and cleansing. He said he'd lost 14 pounds in 3 days. I was shocked. How was his body able to handle that? Of course, he was physically stronger than Carl, and about 20 years younger, so probably that made a difference in how he responded to the healing. Plus, these were not bloodline reptilians. He was not born with them. We think that made a difference too. But we wouldn't have known what to do with Jose had we not done this first with Carl. It was a steep learning curve for all of us. Guided or misguided? Carl was understandably frustrated that he hadn't had as positive a response as Jose's. He wasn't aware of any changes in his thinking, but I thought it might be too soon for him to have that kind of clarity after having had reptilians inside him all his life. He didn't really know his own mind yet. We needed to make sure we were closing everything off in Carl and not leaving any open portals for the reptilians to use. We also wanted to give him as much help and healing as we could to shift his frequency and raise his vibration, which was difficult for him to do for himself after his lifetime of conditioning. Carl had been trained in Reiki, and although he hadn't practiced it in a very long time, he used to be able to bring through the light and the Reiki energy. Robert thought it would help him if he started doing that again, but Carl was concerned about bringing in more energy. He'd been told several times he had too much energy coming in, and it was backing up and contributing to his illness. I wasn't sure what he meant by that, and I don't think he really was either. Over the years, decades even, Carl had been to so many different types of practitioners, healers, and psychics that all of us, including him, had a difficult time sorting everything out. He was overloaded with information about what was going on with him, and some of the work he'd done appears to have been at cross purposes. He had also had at least a couple of major setbacks as a result of following the suggestions of one or another practitioner. As a result, he was confused and afraid to try anything that might make him feel worse, and Reiki, he said, did not necessarily make him feel good. This is one of the reasons I generally discourage people from seeking or receiving any other type of treatment during the first 3 to 6 weeks they're working with me. When you see one person and then another person and yet another person, each of whom has a different perspective and a different approach, all it does is complicate the situation. If you've seen a variety of people and tried all kinds of techniques and treatments and are still not feeling any better, you can begin to doubt you'll ever get better. Eventually that doubt and fear can expand to the point where you convince yourself there's nothing that can help you. And the worst part about it is you're then unable to help yourself. Channeling had also been suggested to Carl as a way to move the supposed excess energy through him. Although he'd made a couple of attempts, he hadn't been able to stick with it and admitted he wasn't really open to it. I never was relaxed enough to let it just come through me, he said. Not even 20 years ago. I've been skeptical for a long time and pissed off, so I'm just not open to it. But Carl wouldn't have been able to channel when he had those reptilians in him. And even if he had been able to, what would he have been channeling? I always advise people who want to learn how to channel to have any entities removed beforehand. Demons and reptilians will block people and impede their connection with Source. Once those entities are removed, most people have no problem connecting. It was just as well Carl hadn't been able to channel when he tried to before, but his lack of success increased his doubt about being able to do anything positive or effective on his own behalf. He thought his left brain was getting in the way of his being able to engage his right brain, which was probably true. He knew meditating was one way to engage his right brain, but meditation was also hard for him. That was no surprise to me either. How can you quiet your mind to meditate with all those entities, especially reptilians, chattering away inside? You can't. Now that the reptilians were gone, channeling, meditating, and even Reiki were legitimate options and tools he could use to help him raise his vibration. But knowing what to do and doing it are two different things. More work to do. What else could we do for him as a group? Robert asked the Arcturians if all the portals in Carl were closed. The answer was no. Robert then had a vision of between 3 and 5 portals inside Carl's spine. The Arcturians told Robert the portals were at the DNA level, which meant they had been in Carl's body from the beginning. If he still had these portals, why hadn't he had any more reptilian visitors? We thought it might be due to the extra protection he was receiving at the moment. We didn't yet know that once reptilians have been removed from somebody, that person cannot get them ever again in this lifetime. The Arcturians asked us to direct light at Carl's spine. If we actually ran light down his spine, we could secure and heal the portals. So I asked Robert and Lisa to fill Carl with light and to visualize the light going through his spine. I stood behind Carl with my hands on his shoulders. As soon as we got started, I felt a tremendous, powerful electrical jolt, and Carl said he could feel the heat from my hands. Lisa saw the Arcturian sending light up and down Carl's spine, and also to the area around his jaw. After a short time, she saw that the top 3 portals had been closed, but the 2 lower ones were still open. Robert noticed that all the energy had been concentrated around the top of Carl's shoulders. He felt we were trying to get down near Carl's tailbone, but we hadn't quite been able to do it. So I asked that we all focus on the lower area of Carl's spine. As we did that, both Lisa and Robert sensed that the portals were in between the chakras. And they're very dense in their magnetism, Lisa said. Very dense. We succeeded in pushing the light through the 4th portal. The 5th one was especially resistant, so I told everyone to get ready for a big push, and that finally did it. We got the light through that one too. Lisa suggested we finish by showering light over Carl's entire body. I felt we all could benefit from a shower of light. Robert saw that all the portals in Carl's spine had been healed. I saw all of the chakra colors being illuminated and balanced, he said. I then saw his aura being filled with white light and a beautiful gold light being put around it to protect him. It feels strong and clear at the moment. Taking one step at a time. I was glad we had been able to accomplish this task. But why had it even come up now? What else needed to be done that we weren't yet aware of? Were we not asking the Arcturians in the right way? Was our energy not strong enough? Was it that Carl could only handle a little bit at a time? I was getting impatient. I wanted it done. All of it. Robert reminded us we had been told the work on Carl would have to be done in stages, which is why he'd been so surprised when Lisa and I told him how many entities we removed from Jose over the weekend. But again, Jose was younger and stronger and had not had the reptilian since his birth. That's why we're seeing it in your spine, Robert told Carl. It's in your body, and it's almost like ripping someone's spine out. It's right down at the genetic code level. So we've got to go a stage at a time. That reminded me of our first group session when Carl's mother had come through and told us the possession Carl was dealing with went back 3 generations. She had mentioned his DNA, and Lisa too had picked up on the fact that Carl had something in his bloodline. We just hadn't had enough information to put the pieces together. This also explained why other healers who had seen the reptilians saw them as feelers or transmitters instead of entities, because they were part of Carl's body, entwined in his DNA. I asked if there was anything else, anything more that we could do at this time, and the answer was no. Robert didn't think there were any more portals to close or entities to remove, but the work was not yet done. Using the house metaphor again, we had finished gutting the house, and now it was time to remodel. The person who's in charge of the house has never had a chance to wander around and look at it, Robert said. He told Carl that in order to prevent problems from creeping back in, he needed to learn to look after the house, which he had never had to do, or been able to do before now. Robert also acknowledged Carl's anger about all he'd had to go through before. "I'm just hoping it's going to stop," Carl said, "that it's going to start to heal." Robert reminded him about getting into the habit of protecting and cleansing on a regular basis. If necessary, we would help him find something that worked for him to bring the light in and get him any assistance he needed to do it. But he was still resistant to the idea he could help himself. "I tried to do those kinds of things before," he said, "and look what's happened." Robert contended the situation was quite different now, but as we'd seen, the results of Carl's experiences had destroyed his faith in himself and his own abilities. That may have been the biggest obstacle he was facing now, and there was only so much we could do to help him over it. Robert thought it might be beneficial for him to join a group of people who channeled or did some type of light work to make it easier on himself. Carl had been stagnant for such a long time and had seen no improvement in his health and well-being. But recently, he had been moving forward. It may have been 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but that's progress. Slow, steady progress. No one could predict how long the entire recovery process would take, but whether he could see or acknowledge it or not, I could see that he was making progress. "Baby steps," Lisa said. "They're showing me you have to take baby steps." Because his physical difficulties were making it so hard for him to take action on his own behalf, I referred him to another psychic. She was also a medical intuitive, which was not an ability anyone in our group had at that time. Carl was reluctant, but he agreed to see her, at least for 1 session. Just then, I felt the presence of Carl's mother among us. Lisa also sensed her presence and conveyed her words of encouragement to her son. She told Carl he had had something toxic in his body that had nothing to do with the reptilians, but he had the power to push that toxicity out. She said his healing would come from within. She was always with him, and she had pulled all of us together to work with him. She urged him to connect with his higher self. His guides were available for him to call upon, as were the Arcturians, to help with his healing. Carl's mother also told him to call upon the Andromedans to fill him with a creative vibration. She wanted him to paint, to create some kind of a visual art to help open a softer part of himself. Lisa saw the color pink associated with that opening. "I am sending you much love and light, my dear son." Carl acknowledged he had to be willing to try it one more time, even though he was skeptical and lacked faith in himself, even if he didn't believe anything he did would work. His doubt was in himself, not in anything the healing team had said or done. He said, "I've been aware of this from things I've seen and experienced many times over, but that doesn't change the fact that I haven't been able to do anything about it." I told him he wouldn't have results overnight, but the opportunity was there for a new beginning, a new lease on life. He now had a chance to reprogram himself. Best of all, he had a choice. He hadn't had a choice before. "It feels frightening," Carl said, "like I've been cut loose." We all assured him we were not cutting him loose. In fact, we agreed again to meet in 2 weeks. That would give him an opportunity to practice cleansing and protecting himself and his house and becoming more aware of what was going on around him. Robert told him he was a very brave soul. With all he'd gone through, it was amazing to the rest of us that Carl was still alive. "Oh yes," Carl said, "still alive. That I can agree with."